Hello everyone and welcome back. You know, it wasn't that long ago that if you were to ask me for a pretty good recommendation on putting together a bolt-action 22-250 varmint rifle, among the top of my recommendations for you would be the Tikka T3 varmint. And as far as a scope to put on it, I'd say why not a Vortex 4x16 scope, for example. And if you were to ask me for an ammo choice to sight it in with, I'd say by all means sight it in with a 50 grain bullet if you can. And here's why. It's not that the 50 grain bullets are superior to the others, but they're kind of right there in the middle with bullet weight. So in other words, if you were to sight in the rifle with a 50 grain bullet and be pinpoint accurate with it, from there, if you ever wanted to throw the 45 grain bullets in there in a pinch, you wouldn't be that far off of zero. And if you wanted to go the other direction and shoot a little bit heavier bullet, you could shoot the 55 grain bullets, which are pretty common, and you wouldn't be that far off from your 50 grain bullet zero either. But today, with these new day-night smart scopes, if you will, you no longer have to choose between shooting pretty close to accurate and shooting pinpoint accurate. Here's what I mean by that. Today we're going to be shooting the Tikka T3 varmint rifle. You'll see the first ever shots with it, so the video will be a little bit of a review about the rifle, and it'll also be a review about the ATN 4K scope. Now there's a lot of other good day-night scopes as well. They have a lot of the same concepts in common. We're going to go with the ATN 4K Pro 5x20 scope. Wow, what a mouthful. We'll be using that one today. Now on a traditional scope, you're actually looking through glass. What a concept. With these new scopes, you're looking through glass, but there's a TV screen in the middle. You're not really looking directly at the target, you're looking at a TV monitor. But it is so clear that you wouldn't know the difference if I didn't tell you. Now when sighting in a rifle with a regular scope, naturally you'd probably start maybe off at 50, you'd start off maybe at 50 yards. You'd aim right here. But if you were hitting over here on your first shot, you'd use the turrets on top, give it 2 or 3 clicks of elevation, 2 or 3 clicks of windage, squeeze the trigger again, and just kind of, you'd walk it in. You'd repeat the process 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times maybe, until you're hitting a bullseye at 60 yards, or 50 yards rather. Then you'd take the target up to 100, you'd keep polishing it and fine-tuning it, and if you're smart, you'd take it up to 200 and work on it a little bit more. But today, with these new smart scopes, they claim, anyway, that it's a one-shot zero, meaning on your very first shot, you'll aim here, but if you wind up hitting over here, what you'll do is you'll simply select zero rifle. You'll click zero the rifle, and then from there, rather than having one set of crosshairs, you'll have 2 sets of crosshairs that show up, and they're just sitting right on top of each other. One of them is white, one of them is red. You'll use the buttons on the top of the scope, and the arrow keys, if you will, and you'll make the white crosshairs just kind of stay right here where you first shot, and the red crosshairs, you'll use those arrow keys and just kind of move them over to where the bullet just now went through. Once you have the red crosshairs lined up right where you first hit, and the white crosshairs lined up at the bullseye mark where you'd like to hit, you simply click Save and Exit. From there, it's supposed to take your very next shot and put it right on the money for you, right in the X-ring. Well, we're going to put that to the test today. We'll put that to the test with the 45 grain bullet, the 50 grain bullet, and the 55 grain bullet. We'll do that at 50 yards. We'll do it at 100 yards. And then we'll take the rifle out to 300 yards and just see if we're any good at 300 yards with that. If we are, great. If why not, why not? So if you like today's video, please remember to click the like button, do subscribe, and turn on the notifications icon. And as always, we're looking forward to your comments. Thanks again. Alright, so this is the target that was just now hit at 50 yards, 22-250, 45 grain hollow point. This was my very first shot, and then after zeroing the rifle, this is shot number 2. This is shot number 3. Okay, so this is the target that I just now shot with the 50 grain Varmint Express. This is the very first shot at 50 yards. This is shot number 2. This is shot number 3. All right, this is the results of the 55 grain 22-250 Fiocchi. First shot right down here by the number 7. Shots number 2 and 3 right there in the X-ring. Distance 50 yards. Okay, so this is at 100 yards with the 45 grain hollow points by Winchester. First shot was here, did some corrections with the scope. Second shot was there. Third shot, I might have pulled that a little bit. Might need some more work with this. Fine tune it a little bit. Okay, so this is the target at 100 yards. The very first shot that I did before making corrections was right here. After I made the corrections, I hit here, and then here and here at 100 yards. 22-250, shooting the Hornady 50 grain Varmint Express. All right, so that was my first day ever shooting the Tikka T3 Varmint 22-250. From there, all I really did was clean up the barrel a little bit, did not use a brush on it. You can use a brush if you want to. I'd rather just go extra with patches, use extra patches, extra cleaner. But that's just me. From there, I went ahead and I measured the trigger pull to see what I was getting for a trigger pull. This Wheeler trigger pull I have found, or this Wheeler gauge, trigger pull gauge, I have found to be very accurate, really easy to use. The trigger from the factory came in at 3 pounds 1 ounce. I did not lighten the trigger pull just yet. It seemed rather heavy. Now, just because it seemed heavy, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's Tikka's fault. It seemed heavy to me because I'm used to shooting a CZ 527 varmint where the regular pull is 2.5 pounds, and on a CZ rifle, if you push the trigger forward a little bit, it becomes a set trigger, and it breaks right at 1 pound exactly. And according to Wheeler, sometimes it breaks at 15.9 ounces. So when you're used to a really, really light trigger pull like that, 3 pounds feels like you're pushing a truck. But at any rate, I left it at 3 pounds for this next group of shooting. Hope you'll enjoy. All right, shooting at a distance of 100 yards with 22-250. These are the 45 grain jacketed hollow points by Winchester. They were chronographed doing just over 4,000 feet per second, right around 4075 if you wanted to be technical. On all three, they were all above 4,000 feet per second. These up here are the 50 grain Hornady VMAX bullets. I'm not done really sighting this in yet, but they're averaging right around 3,600 and change feet per second. Okay, in the upper right hand corner, this is a 3-shot group Hornady Varmint Express, 50 grain, 100 yards, 22-250. And then I shot a little better. This was the first shot. I made a little bit of a correction with the scope. Shots number 2 and 3 were touching each other at 100 yards. Also 50 grain Varmint Express. All right, I was shooting at 100 yards with a 22-250 55 grain VMAX. This is the first shot, and then I made some corrections with the scope. Shot number 2 and shot number 3 right there at 100 yards. So we might call that good enough for now. Well, for this next group of shooting, we're going to go out and shoot some water jugs at 300 yards. Now, you're going to notice that on the first ballistic profile, using the 50 grain bullet, I'm not going to have too much trouble at all. I simply told the rifle with the distance entry tool that, hey, I'm shooting at a distance of 300 yards. I turned on the ballistic calculator function, and away I went. But then, when I started shooting the 45 grain hollow points, something seemed off to me. I was constantly shooting low to the right. I don't know, 7-8 inches low, 4 or 5 inches to the right. You'll see what I mean in a moment. I mean, even though I'm only going to show you one shot, believe me, there's a lot of footage I'm not showing you where I was shooting right there, low to the right every time. So I went ahead and I brought the rifle back home thinking, maybe I'm pulling my shots, I don't know. Why don't I lighten up the trigger pull? So using the Wheeler gauge here, it was a very simple process to take the rifle from a 3.1 ounce or 3 pound 1 ounce pull, took it down to 2.25 pounds, shot the third water jug that you're about to see on a completely different day with a lighter trigger pull, and you're going to see pretty much the same issue. I mean, I'm telling the rifle that, hey, I'm out here at 300 yards. I even used a 55 grain bullet on the second day rather than a 45 grain bullet, thinking maybe it was the wind pushing the bullet to the side. Let's use a 55 grain bullet, not be affected by wind. I'll have a lighter trigger pull. We'll get the job done this time. Or maybe not. So finally I got home and I called ATN customer service and they explained to me exactly what I had done wrong to not make the shot. And I'll be sharing those details with you after we see the one make and maybe a couple of near misses. We'll be shooting at this water jug, distance 300 yards, using a 22-250 50 grain Hornady Varmint Express. We'll be shooting this water jug at a distance of 300 yards with a 22-250 using a 45 grain jacketed hollow point by Winchester. We're shooting at this water jug at a distance of 300 yards with a 22-250 55 grain bullet, Winchester ballistic silvertip. Alright, as you can tell, I had some problems out there at 300 yards with 2 out of those 3 profiles. Both the 45 grain and the 55 grain were hitting somewhere around that dot right there. What was happening is I was telling the scope that, hey, I'm out here at 300 yards. I was using the distance entry function just fine. Told the scope I was at 300 yards and everything. But I was failing to turn on the ballistic calculator. So remember, it's not enough to tell the scope what distance you're at. You must also remember to turn on the ballistic calculator. Had I done so, I wouldn't have been hitting here. Would have been hitting, somewhere right around here. So that would have definitely solved some of my problem. What would have solved the rest of my problem is had I done some 200-yard fine-tuning. I would have noticed that I'm hitting probably right about that dot or somewhere in the general area. Now, does that mean that I'm going to rush out and make a full value correction to put me right on the 0 line? Maybe not. This is a rather new rifle for me. I would like to think that I'm pulling these shots just a little bit still. So I'll probably I'll probably cut the distance in half, maybe 55 or 60% correction. Try to start shooting right about there and leave myself a little bit of room to grow as a shooter. Not pull the shots so much, and that will probably bring me the rest of the way over to the 0 line. Okay, so at this point we'll go out and take a look at how the rifle is shooting with the 45 grain hollow points at 100 yards now that the trigger has been taken from a 3-pound pull down to about 2 1/4. Alright, this is 3 shots at 100 yards, 22-250, 45 grain jacketed hollow point by Winchester.